Okay, it's Mr. Michelin again, and this is the first video on the next topic for Year 8, which is in Chapter 4 of Learning Fields, and this is to do with living connections. So we're going to have a look at how your body sort of gets all the different nutrients and things that it needs and some of the processes that it goes through. So in particular, we're going to have a look at your heart, your blood vessels and your blood, and your lungs. And maybe if we have a bit of time, we'll have a look at a few other bits and pieces as well. But they're the main ones. We're going to have a look at blood, heart, lungs. What do they do? What are their different parts? What are their functions? How do they all work together? And this is Chapter 4, and we're actually starting at 4.3. So 4.1 and 4.2, look, they're good to know. Definitely recommended reading, but we don't need to know them for Year 8. So to start off with this topic, we need to actually, with this topic of heart, lungs, and blood, we actually need to start with blood. Because blood is essentially the body's courier system. So all of your blood vessels take blood around the body, but your blood plays a very, very important role. It carries all the nutrients to all the various different cells. So we talked about cells in the last topic, and cells need some bits and pieces in order to function. They need oxygen, and they need sugar so that they can actually go through respiration. So the blood needs to take them there. But then the blood also needs to take all the waste products out of the cell for disposal. So that your blood and your blood vessels serve as a big courier system and as a big transport system. So it's the body's courier system, it's the body's transport system. So it takes important things to your cells, and it takes things back, or takes all the waste products away from your cells to be disposed of. Okay. Now the average person has anywhere between 5 to 7 litres of blood. So not even a bucket full. All right. So if we were to open you up and pour all your blood out, obviously we're not going to do that, but in case we would probably fill an average bucket about 2/3. You actually don't have that much. It's not as much as we think. And those of you who are more vertically challenged, you'll have a bit less. And those of you who are a bit more vertically enhanced, you'll have a bit more. Women tend to have a little bit less because on average they're a little bit smaller than guys. But on average we've got anywhere between 5 to 7 litres of blood. And it's being pumped around your body continuously via your heart, and we'll talk about the heart's function a little bit later. And your blood makes its way around our body through 3 major highways, or highway types. And the first one is your arteries. So your arteries take blood from the heart to somewhere else. Somewhere else. So take blood from the heart to your head, to your legs, to your spleen, to your stomach, to wherever. Pumps blood from the heart to where else? With the exception of a single artery, which we'll talk about when we talk about the heart, arteries carry blood that is full of oxygen. So they carry oxygenated blood. It's under high pressure because it's coming from the heart. As the heart squeezes, it pushes the blood in the arteries first, so they're under much higher pressure. So the walls of an artery tend to be a bit thicker. Okay, so they have thick walls to handle that pressure. And heaven forbid you should ever cut an artery. If you do, all jokes aside, it's quite a serious matter. You'll find that the blood is bright red because of the oxygen, and the blood would spurt. It would not pour out of you, it would spurt. It would go spurt, spurt, spurt. So every time your heart beats, it would pump blood out of you. That's why if you cut an artery or if you nick an artery, it's a really big major problem. Okay? So we have 5 to 7 litres of blood, and the first major highway that it goes through is your arteries. That's taking blood from the heart to somewhere else. You then have veins, which are smaller than arteries, not much smaller really, arteries. And they have slightly thinner walls. The walls are still pretty, reasonably thick, but they're thinner than the artery because the blood is under lower pressure. It's carrying deoxygenated blood. And veins do the opposite of the arteries. They carry blood from somewhere else back to the heart. That's the real way you tell you're looking at an artery or a vein. If it's pumping blood from the heart, it's an artery. If it's taking blood to the heart, it's a vein. And we have some pretty sort of major veins and arteries, and they're quite big transport systems. Probably the thickest one's probably about as thick as your forefinger. And your veins and your arteries are kind of like the highways in your body. You have one other type of blood vessel, and that's called a capillary, or capillary, depending on your pronunciation. And these are like all the little back streets. These have very thin walls, so that stuff can pass through the wall into the cells, because the capillaries take blood to the cells. Okay, so the arteries, as they move from the heart, they start to branch off like a major highway and like all the off-ramps, and then that road will turn into like a suburb, and there might be lots of little streets within that suburb. And so your arteries and your veins will split off, and they become smaller and smaller and smaller until they become like the little back streets. This is when they're capillaries. Okay, and the capillaries take blood to the cell, and they also carry blood out of the cell. Blood out of cell. The blood that's going to the cell is the good stuff, so it's got oxygen and other good stuff. And the blood coming out of the cell is full of carbon dioxide and other bad stuff, so all the other waste products that the cell produces. Okay? So we got 5 to 7 litres of blood, 3 major blood vessels. Blood itself, what does blood consist of? Well, if you took a sample of your own blood and you spun it around in one of them centrifuge things, you'd actually find it's made of 3 things. There's a part that kind of looks like dirty water, and that's called your blood plasma. Makes up just over half, so about 55%. And this is mostly water and various different proteins and things like that. You would have blood cells, red and white. Red would be the overwhelming majority. So red blood cells make up about 45% of your blood. Not 45% of your cells, 45% of your blood. White blood cells make up now I know you're all going, geez, 45 and 55 makes 100, Mr. Michelin. You can't have more than that. This would be roughly 55, roughly 45. White blood cells are like about 0.1%. White blood cells are used to fight off disease. Red blood cells carry oxygen. Okay, they have no nucleus, and they're full of a thing called hemoglobin, and that carries oxygen and carbon dioxide. Your white blood cells are involved in fighting off diseases and things. And the last important part of your blood are what are called platelets, which make up a very, very, very small proportion. And they help with clotting your blood. There's the bell. They help with clotting your blood so that, when you cut yourself, the blood comes out and it hardens and forms like a shell. Okay? So that is blood, the three major blood vessels, and what is blood made of. And the next video we'll talk a bit about blood types, and then we'll get on to the heart. Thank you.